I'm Dawn Hill, host of Heart, Mind, and Purpose, a podcast where we explore what it means to live an aligned and wholehearted life. I am a professional counselor with over 25 years of experience and a deep love for meaningful conversation. I bring you honest reflections, soulful questions, and meaningful tools for managing life. Whether you're seeking clarity, connection, or simply a space to breathe, this podcast is here for you. Tune in weekly and join me on the journey.
Welcome to Heart, Mind, and Purpose, where we explore how our inner lives shape the way we love, connect, and grow. Hi, this is Paul Gramercy, producer of today's episode, where Dawn asks, have you ever wanted to make a change but felt overwhelmed before you even started? The truth is, lasting transformation often begins with one small choice, one small step, one small shift over time. Today, Dawn explores how small changes can create powerful results in our lives, relationships, emotional well-being, and faith. If you've ever felt stuck or overwhelmed by change, this conversation is for you. Here's Dawn with small shifts that change everything.
Welcome back to Heart, Mind, and Purpose. Have you ever noticed how often we try to change our lives all at once? A new year arrives, a birthday comes, or a difficult season ends. And suddenly, we are convinced that what we need is a complete reinvention, maybe a new routine, a new mindset, a new version of ourselves. And I know I've been there. There have been seasons in my own life when I believed that if I was going to feel better, grow more, or become healthier, then I needed to overhaul everything all at once. And yet, those big plans often left me feeling overwhelmed, discouraged, and wondering what was wrong with me. What I have learned over time is that meaningful change rarely happens through dramatic transformations. It usually happens through small shifts, tiny choices, small acts of kindness towards ourselves, little decisions repeated over and over again, and surprisingly, those small shifts can change everything. Today, I'd like to talk about why it works this way. I think many of us have been taught that change must be dramatic to matter. We imagine a completely new morning routine, an hour at the gym every day, perfect eating habits, never feeling anxious again, or becoming a different person overnight. But real life doesn't work that way. For example, a woman decides she's going to wake up at 5 a.m., exercise for an hour, journal, meditate, meal prep, and drink a gallon of water every day. Then 3 weeks later, she's exhausted, not because she's weak, but because she tried to change everything all at once. Or perhaps a man decides he's going to finally get organized. He buys planners, apps, calendars, and productivity systems. A month later, he feels frustrated because none of it stuck. The problem wasn't motivation. The problem was trying to make giant leaps instead of small steps. So let's look at why small changes work. One of the fascinating things researchers have discovered is that our brains were wired to resist large-scale change, not because we're lazy and not because we're broken, but because our brain is designed to keep us safe. Large changes can feel threatening, and small changes feel manageable. That's why something as simple as drinking 1 glass of water in the morning, walking for 5 minutes, taking 3 slow breaths, or writing 1 sentence in a journal can be more effective than a dramatic overhaul. The brain says, I can do that. And then something important happens. We begin to trust ourselves again. Imagine someone who has spent years saying, I need to start exercising. They buy the shoes, they read the articles, and they watch the videos, but they never begin. Then one day they decide to walk for 5 minutes. Not 50, 5. And they do it again the next day and the next. Eventually, the biggest change isn't physical. It's that they begin believing in themselves again. That trusting yourself again is a powerful theme. There is also the power in tiny wins. Researchers call this the small win effect. Every time we follow through on a small commitment, Our brain rewards us. We then begin building momentum. Think of it this way. Imagine two people. One decides to walk 5 minutes every day, and the other decides to walk around the block. Who is more likely to be walking 3 months from now? Usually the first person, because consistency beats intensity every time. A personal example, I remember a season when I thought I needed to completely reinvent my life. Instead, I started with small things, a short walk, putting on music instead of scrolling media, writing down one thought before bed rather than letting it circle endlessly in my mind. At first, those choices felt insignificant, but over time they began changing how I felt physically, emotionally, and mentally, not because they were dramatic, but because they were consistent. It's like the ripple effect. One of my favorite things about small shifts is they rarely stay contained. They create ripple effects. Here are 2 examples. First, a parenting example, and I see this often with parents. A parent decides they are going to stop checking their phone during dinner. That's all, nothing dramatic. Yet within a few weeks, they notice more conversation, more eye contact, and more opportunities to connect with their family. One small shift creates a ripple through the entire family. Second, an everyday life example. You start going to bed 30 minutes earlier. You sleep better. You wake up with more energy. Because you have more energy, you are more patient. Because you are more patient, your relationships improve. And because your relationships improve, you feel less stressed. One small shift brings multiple benefits. Or perhaps you begin taking a 10-minute walk after lunch. Your mood improves. Your mind feels clearer. You make better decisions, and you feel more capable. Again, one small shift, many ripples. Small shifts aren't only behavioral, sometimes they are mental. For example, instead of always saying things like I failed, you could learn to say I am learning. Instead of I'm behind, you could learn to say I'm in a season of becoming. Or instead of saying nothing is changing, you begin asking yourself, what small progress am I overlooking? Those tiny mindset shifts often change how we experience our entire life. One section of research that really struck me is that many adults have stopped playing. I once spoke with someone who realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd done anything simple because it was fun. Everything had become productive or useful or efficient. So she started buying flowers at the grocery store, not because she needed them and not because they checked a box, simply because they made her smile. Sometimes healing begins in surprisingly ordinary ways, and somewhere along the way, we become convinced that everything must be productive. It became everything had to be useful, efficient, purposeful. But play matters. Maybe play looks like dancing in your kitchen, or working in your garden, or painting, playing with grandchildren, or laughing with friends, or just taking a walk without tracking your steps, not because it accomplishes something, but because it reminds us that we are human, and sometimes that joy itself is healing. One of the most beautiful concepts I came across is something called a glimmer. A glimmer is opposite of a trigger. We all know what triggers are, but a glimmer is a tiny cue of safety, a small moment that reminds your nervous system you are okay and you are safe. Some examples might be sunlight through a window, a favorite song, the smell of coffee, a warm hug, a text from a friend, or the sound of laughter, to name only a few. As people of faith, we might call these micro-blessings. They are like little reminders of God's presence in ordinary moments, like a verse that speaks directly to your heart, or a moment of unexpected peace, or a kindness you did not see coming. And tiny gifts become tiny shifts and tiny reminders that we are not alone. Maybe you're having a difficult day and a friend texts you saying, I was thinking about you, or you're sitting on your back porch feeling overwhelmed, and suddenly you notice a cool breeze, birds singing, or the sun filtering through the trees. Nothing in your circumstances changed, but something inside you did. It softens. Those are the moments I'm talking about. One reason people abandon change is because they don't see immediate results. But transformation is the long game. Think about a tree. You don't plant a tree on Monday and expect shade by Friday. Growth takes time. Roots grow before branches. Strength develops before fruit appears. The same is true in our lives. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is us showing up again and again and again. So today I want to leave you with a simple question. What's one small shift you could make this week? Not 10, not 20, 1. Maybe it's drinking more water. Maybe it's taking a walk. Maybe it's putting your phone down 30 minutes earlier. Or maybe it's writing down one thing you're grateful for. Maybe it's taking 3 slow breaths before you respond to someone you love. Small does not mean insignificant. Small means sustainable. And sustainable change is often the kind that lasts. Because the truth is, most meaningful transformation does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly. One choice, one habit, one breath, one moment at a time. Thank you for spending time today with me on Heart, Mind, and Purpose. And as you move through your week, please pay attention to the small things, the tiny shifts, the glimmers, the micro blessings, because sometimes the changes that feel almost invisible today become the very things that transform your life tomorrow. Remember, small shifts really can change everything. And I'd like to end on this thought. The most meaningful transformation doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, one choice, one habit, one breath, one moment at a time. Until next time, may you be kind to your heart, clear in your mind, and grounded in your purpose. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Heart, Mind, and Purpose. As you move through the week, remember that lasting change doesn't require a complete life overhaul. Sometimes growth begins with a small step, a 5-minute walk, a deeper breath, a kind word, or a moment of gratitude. Don't underestimate small beginnings. Over time, those little shifts can make meaningful change. Find resources and listener handouts at dawnmariehill.com/heart and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Questions or comments? Contact Dawn at heartmindandpurpose.podcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.